In today's Locked On Pelicans, we're looking at two guard prospects and why they would both fit on the Pelicans in very different ways. Plus, we have a Trey Murphy injury update. It's the Thursday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with you on this Thursday, some internet issues still, so the show's coming out a little bit late, but I'm excited for this one because we're talking about some really interesting prospects. Jeremiah Fears out of Oklahoma and Kasparas Jakucionis out of Illinois. Point guards that the Pelicans do need to add to this roster, but they do different things. So if you already got a preference for one of those players, let me know in the comments down below. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So let's get into it. Draft talk here on Locked On Pelicans. We're looking at two players, and I want to start with Jeremiah Fears out of Oklahoma. This is someone that, since I've been clued into them, to take a look at them a little bit more, I'm a big fan watching him play. Pretty good size at 6'4", weighs about 185 pounds, a very good wingspan. He's a freshman. He's 18 years old. Averaged 16.7 points per game, 4.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists, and 1.6 steals. But when you watch him play, you see shades of a guy like Jamal Murray and some others in him. And it goes back to that draft with Jamal Murray where he went one pick after the Pelicans took Buddy Hield 6th overall. They could have had him. I've actually told a story about why they specifically did not draft him on this podcast. You'd have to search for that one. It's pretty old at this point. It was like pre-YouTube days of everything. So that tells you, one, how long I've been doing this. But that's literally why Dell Demps did not draft Jamal Murray. Pelicans might be in position to, I wouldn't say rectify that mistake, but get that kind of type of player that seems to add a lot of what they do. And when you look at Jamal Murray, questions coming into the league with him beyond just the defense, which was part of it, is he a true point guard? Can he run your offense? And is the shooting going to be there? And those are two of the bigger questions I think it comes to with Jeremiah Fears. When you look at what he does well, and we'll get to those questions in a second here, he's a downhill attacking guard, which is just not what this team has. That's not Jose Alvarado. That's not CJ McCollum. It's somewhat more of a DeJounte Murray, but he's not going to be ready at the start of the year. So if you're looking to have that aspect on your team and someone who can run point guard for you, and they're going to be they have to get one this offseason. You see it with Elfrid Payton out there right now. You need someone like this. So as a guy that gets downhill and has very good acceleration and deceleration, kind of that in-between game where is he going, is he not, fast, then slow, then fast, slow, those type of things, it keeps defenders on edge. They're not sure what you're going to do. And that's the type of thing that's going to be really important. When you have someone like Zion Williamson playing with him, that opens things up even more because he is a very good player in the pick and roll, or at least looks like he will be an exceptional player in the pick and roll. His physicality is there. So when he drives downhill, using that kind of twitchiness that he has, he is physical. So if you body him up, that's fine. In that kind of pick and roll, that physicality, meaning, okay, if you go on Zion, I'm going to get to the rim, and when your rim protector rotates over to take me away, I'll be fine with that sort of thing. That's going to open it up with how shifty he is and the way that he moves. attacking in a pick and roll on like a snake dribble or something like that, he's going to be able to either get fouled or really create for others there. So he brings kind of that downhill game, driving to the rim, that also is going to work in the pick and roll. And when you look at him and his shooting, look, it wasn't particularly incredible in college, particularly from three. Shot 28.4% on almost 4 attempts per game. The number to look at there is his free throw percentage. And this is going to also be the case for Jakucionis, where he, again, is not an elite three-point shooter, but both of their free throw shooting. Fears shot 85% from the free throw line in this year in college. That looks good. And the form looks good. And that usually is going to help better translate to the shooting mechanics in an NBA game. And so watching them play like this, I'm confident that the shooting will come around. If you're looking for someone that is an elite shooter just off the jump coming into the team, you look at someone like Trey Johnson out of Texas, Con Knipple out of Duke, though he's more of a wing and not as much of a guard here, or Jace Richardson out of Michigan State. Those are some of the players that I think come in more NBA ready from shooting. And while some of those guys I think will be good, Trey Johnson is a one type of player. He's just all offense. Fears at least looks like he could be better defensively than he's been, and I think that's an important thing, and just does more than just be a shooter, and I think that's what's really important. So watching him and the way that he plays and seeing that, yeah, he's really good in the mid-range now, all you have to do with him is expand his range, and he should become a three-point shooter. That's encouraging to me. But if it doesn't work out that way, and he doesn't develop that range, you kind of have a guard that doesn't help your spacing whatsoever, and that can be fine on a certain type of team. Is that actually going to be fine on the New Orleans Pelicans with Zion Williamson? That, I think, could be a problem. And that goes to one of the bigger issues with him, right? Like, his shot selection at times is not great. And that's something that we complained about tremendously with Brandon Ingram. It might even be worse at times for Jeremiah Fears, where when you watch him, some of the shots he does or layup attempts that he does is pretty disappointing to see. And he needs to, at the NBA level, those are going to result in block shots. They're just going to result in turnovers or misses and actively harm this team, because sometimes he's come out of nowhere when you watch him play. It's not great. It kind of ties to his overall decision-making, which I think will be fine at the NBA level. I do think this guy's going to be really, really good, and I mean that. But it kind of just goes to the overall, is the basketball IQ there that you want, or is some of the decision-making very questionable? And questionable decision-making on this team next year, that ain't going to work in any capacity. But I think when you look at how he plays, as a guy that also can play off ball pretty well. So while we view him as a point guard, if you also have Zion running point and him there too as kind of that secondary ball handler, that's where I think he's going to thrive his rookie year. And that's why, should the Pelicans, you probably don't take him at 4. You'd take like VJ Edgecombe there. But if, say, Edgecombe goes 3 and you're looking at someone like Ace Bailey, I still think you probably at that point have to take Ace Bailey, even if the fit really here doesn't seem to work with Zion. We saw it with Brandon Ingram, and Bailey's a very similar player. Fears maybe gets in the running for the 4 spot for the Pelicans if it turns out that they really, really like him. But given that you have other guys that can take some of the kind of ball handling pressure off of him a little bit, that mitigates some of the decision-making questions and allows him to figure all of that out. Let me know what you think about Jeremiah Fears in the comments down below. Let's get to Illinois guard Kasparas Jakucionis coming up here next, because he's interesting for a very different reason, but also would fit exactly what New Orleans needs. Let's talk about him coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters, well, no Cinderella stories this year, but even who's just going to win it all. And so if you've got your eye on some upsets, it's been very chalky here in the tournament so far, but if you think there are bigger upsets coming, you make some good money on those sorts of things. And FanDuel makes it easy to back those teams with spreads, totals, game props, and more. And now that we're back to games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And don't forget about the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up now over at LockedOnDaily.com. So we're looking at draft. We're going to be looking at draft for a while here. I'm very excited for the NBA draft lottery where we kind of have a range of where the Pelicans will fit. And while we're hoping they'll pick in the top 4, right now they could drop as far as 8. And that kind of opens up different prospects and new things and different decision-making for the Pelicans. Maybe we'll even talk about that in tomorrow's show. But let's go to Illinois guard Kasparas Jakucionis, who I think is a pretty interesting prospect here for a number of reasons. From Lithuania originally, played for Barcelona too, not their elite team, but played a couple of games with their B team and their junior team as well before committing to Illinois for this season. He's 18 years old as well. This is someone who's 6'6", weighs over 200 pounds, so really good size there, a really good wingspan too. 15.2 points per game. 5.6 rebounds, 4.8 assists, and about a steal per game. And I think when you look at how he plays, the NBA comp that I see that's out there right now is Spencer Dinwiddie for him, right? Like, this is a big guard who can kind of get to where he wants to get on the court. But Dinwiddie has never become a star because he has been very inconsistent. Jakucionis has been very inconsistent for Illinois this year. But when you look at him, he fits that mold, that archetype of the big European shot creator, right? Like a guy with very slick passes who does behind the backs and other things that you go like, huh? You know, I'm not putting him even close to the same type of prospect as Luka Doncic, but he definitely kind of fits in that idea. Or someone like Milos Theodosic, who, you know, didn't really work out in the NBA, was kind of there as someone that really could have, and people thought could have done a really good job in the NBA. So he's just got that like passing innate ability that you see a lot of those players have. So when you look at him with that size, it's something that you salivate at, because at that size, guys like that tend to succeed really well in the pick and roll. You can survey the floor. You can see passing lanes that smaller guards might not be able to see. And that's maybe the type of dynamic. You know, he's not as downhill of an attacker as Jeremiah Fears is, but do you want someone that surveys the floor through some of that craftiness, can create wide open shots? Look, do the Pelicans even have enough shooting to really support him as that type of player? Or is this just more of a way for him to create open shots off of Zion Williamson for others? And so he seems like he would do well in the pick and roll with this sort of thing. And when you look at him and his numbers, and the shooting, again, not all there. He shot better from 3 than Fears did. On the season, it's 32%. In conference play, it was 33%, so a little bit better on all, 5-6 attempts per game. The numbers are definitely, at least that he can be a volume shooter. And when you look at him in other places too, I do think you've seen a 3-point shot that will develop, and he's not scared to shoot it. And that's a pretty important thing as well. So when you look at how he shoots from the free throw line, the stroke, the form, all of that, that's the type of thing that, again, means he should translate. He's shooting basically 85% from the free throw line, and he's done that consistently in his playing career in various areas. But when you look at the mechanics, like, this does look like a guy that should go out and develop into a good 3-point shooter, or at least a reliable 3-point shooter. And that's a pretty important thing. And when we watch him, how he plays, he's pretty fearless. He got injured earlier in the year, but then he comes back and he's immediately diving on the floor, fighting for loose balls. It's kind of got like all of those things that you want, those kind of intangible pieces to things of a guy that's like gonna go out and potentially really help you in this way. As an athlete, he's probably a slightly above average, a little bit above average when that comes to that sort of thing. So this is someone that I don't think is going to be an elite defender at the NBA level. Good size, but don't look for like a Dyson Daniels kind of impact on that sort of thing. He's not going to be able to guard guys in the front court. He can take on smaller wings. He can take on maybe bigger guards, but those quicker, shiftier guards is someone that he's really going to struggle with. And when you look at the Pelicans defense this year, rim protection is an issue, but it's really more that lack of a point of attack disruptor that Herb Jones can be, that DeJounte Murray can be. And look, maybe Murray is or isn't part of the long-term future of the team, but Jakucionis is not going to come in and, replace that sort of thing. And might be, likely for the first couple of seasons is going to be a liability on defense. I mentioned the inconsistency, and this is kind of the biggest concern for me when it comes to him, is that he was inconsistent all year long for Illinois. And maybe you could argue got worse as the season went on. His numbers in conference play were about the same, but not necessarily significantly better. And towards the end of the season, he really started to struggle, it seemed like. That's not what you want from him, at the NBA level. And that is definitely a very big concern, right? In that game that they lost to Kentucky, he had 13 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 6 turnovers. The game before, in a win over Xavier in the tournament, the numbers look great. He almost had a triple-double, 16 points, 10 assists, 9 rebounds, but 1 of 6 from 3. And he also had 6 turnovers in that game. They still won because they're the better team. Look, he had a very good stat line, but that's not going to work at the NBA level. If you're turning the ball over that much, his last 4 games, he has turned the ball over 6 times in each one of them. That's not great in my opinion, and that is actually something that's a big concern. So he's inconsistent with his play, but also those turnovers are a really big thing. And we've seen how turnovers for this, the Pelicans kills them. They just can't get back, and you're giving up points in transition, which if you're looking at points per like play type, not shot attempt, but play type, transition is where you get the highest points per possession. You can't give up easy, fast break points to the opponent that way. That's something that Jakucionis is likely going to end up doing for you, at least his rookie year. So this feels like if you want to be in contention next year, you can draft him, but don't expect him to make that sort of outsized impact immediately on this team. But when you look at the size and that kind of archetype as a player, it's still pretty intriguing, isn't it, when it comes to that sort of thing? And you do feel like he will develop into a very solid NBA player. I do think it's just going to take a little bit more time than maybe people are hoping for. And that's not an ideal situation, given that you're kind of in a win now mode around Zion Williamson. Maybe that changes though, right? Like if you drop to 8, and we'll talk about this more in tomorrow's show, you drop to 8 and he's there at 8, does that kind of change your timeline a little bit? And I think it could. So we'll talk more about that in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let me know what you think about Jakucionis in the comments down below. And next, Trey Murphy had surgery. We got the recovery timeline that's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast for a reason. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join, like I said, over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everyday. That means you listen to Locked On Pelicans Monday through Friday. Comment down below if you are. Is there another draft prospect you want to hear about? We're going to be covering them all here on Locked On Pelicans. So big news of Wednesday evening was that the Pelicans announced that forward Trey Murphy III underwent successful surgery today to repair a torn labrum in his right shoulder. The surgery was performed out in Los Angeles. He's going to miss the remainder of the season and is expected to make a full recovery. Further details will be appropriately provided. So a couple things here. Surgery was almost always how this was going to end up for him. It's very similar to the surgery that Herb Jones suffered, the injury and the surgery that Herb Jones had earlier on in the season here. The bad news is this is a 4 to 5 month minimum recovery from this sort of thing. Now, that doesn't mean he can't do anything during that time. Obviously, he can do some cardio and things like that, but his arm's going to be in a sling for, a period of time right here after the surgery, somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks there. And then you can start moving again, but it takes a while here. And for an NBA player, that's losing a lot of the off season. So, if it's 5 months, that puts us right around the beginning of September, which is going to be right around kind of training camp, preseason, all of those things. Gives him about a month to kind of get in shape and ready for all of that. You can kind of get up to the speed you need, but are you going to be able to add things in the off season? One of the things that I think is pretty incredible about Trey was the growth that you saw this off season from him, right? He came in looking like a very different player. His handle was significantly better this year. The strength that he added on from trying to get stronger to finish through contact and at the rim better was massive. He looked like what you wanted to see from him. And that's a testament to him and the work that he put in the off season. I know he spent about a month in LA working with Drew Hanlon out there, who works with a number of NBA players, to just go out, spend a month in another city, working basically every single day. I love that kind of attitude. That's one of the reasons why we like Trey Murphy so much, because he wants to be the best basketball player that he can be. And this is not a shot, this is literally no subtext or anything like that. Not every player is like that. Just simply put, not every player is like that when it comes to it. So the fact that he wants to go out and do all of that is important and shows that, he's a starter next year, right? There's no question, assuming he's healthy, that he is a starter next year for this team, right? He probably should have been starting all season long for this team. He's definitely kind of proven that point, I think, by now. This might hamper more growth from him. Will he be at least this same level player? Yeah, I would assume so. But when you want guys to ascend, I think can get to all-star level. I really do. So I'm glad that he's getting the surgery. I'm glad that assuming things go well on the timeline, and who knows, he'll be ready hopefully by opening night. But if he's not, or if the surgery, if it drags on a little bit, the recovery, that's going to massively impact this team's season. And when you look at him, he's had a rough go 2 years ago. He had the MCL injury that required surgery. This last offseason, on day one of training camp, he went down with a hamstring injury. And now this is someone who just has not gotten a full offseason. Last year was about as close as you can get before the hamstring injury, but that came up on the shelf for a little while. We want to see him out there playing, and imagine if he just stayed slightly, a little bit healthier, what he could be. And it's a tantalizing idea. He is a very, very good player that we are very, very high on and just does all the right things. He's a very easy guy to root for. He's a fun player to watch when it comes to this sort of thing. So we're hoping that the recovery is going to go well and that he can still continue to grow and be on that upward trajectory as his extension kicks in. So this is, the year where he's making the big money. You want that guy on the court. And again, these injuries happen. That was certainly not a one anyone could have done anything about when you watch that play happen in real time a minute into the game, unfortunately. So just kind of is what it is when it comes to that injury. But I'm glad he had the surgery. I'm glad he's done the surgery relatively quickly to get this taken care of so that he can start recovering. And hopefully we see him out on the court, for the Pelicans right away at the beginning of the year. We want this team to be competitive next year. We want to see them get in, or I want it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want them to go through a rebuild. And we're going to talk about that in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans, which I'm going to record immediately after this. So when I'm wearing the same exact clothes, that's why. So if they're capable of doing that, Trey, getting back to the playoffs, Trey is going to be a big part of it. Hopefully he's ready to go for the beginning of the season because they're certainly going to need his production. Otherwise, it might need to send this team in a bit of a different direction. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. I forgot to tell you, make Locked On Saints your second listen today. Ross Jackson looking at everything the Saints are doing. Draft, Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, other players there. Could they do anything there? Should they do anything there? Jackson Dart is a name that I've seen thrown around. I get excited about QB talk. Ross Jackson over at Locked On Saints is looking at everything black and gold. Make them your second listen today. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. We'll look at what happens if the Pelicans fall in the draft lottery and how that might change their approach to the offseason and maybe what they should do in that point and the other variables at play with this. So that's going to be a big, important discussion that we're going to have in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.